let's move on to our storylines.
Okay, let's go back and forth, play a little bit of tennis with this. And James and I picked five storylines that we just think have been ignored this season for some reason. And we're not going to argue about them. We're just going to kind of state our storyline, state our case, and move on. And so, James, I'm going to let you start out first.
Me first.
Yes.
Okay. I want to talk first about the Utah Jazz's failed tank. I I feel like what happened with here is the team started off hot, right? Pretty hot. So the storyline was, oh my God, the Jazz are actually a good team. You know, that for the first like what, I don't know, 15, maybe even 20 games of the season, they were like pretty good. And
Yeah.
that's what everybody was talking about. It's like, oh, it turns out the Jazz are good. They've got a great system and a well-rounded, balanced, deep roster. Turns out this is a real team. Anyway, turns out that they actually pretty much suck. But since they had that hot start, they're not going to get a marquee draft pick either. And in my opinion, it's like a pretty failed season that's kind of seen as a successful season because we tend to view things through this prism of like winning is good and losing is bad. But like if you're somebody who thinks that NBA teams ought to have a 5-year outlook, you know, I don't really like what the Jazz did this year. So that's that to me. That's an underlooked storyline.
Well, I just don't think they expected Larry Marketing to be an all NBA caliber player this season. He's kind of on that borderline, but hey, that's a win for them. All right. This is a storyline that I wish more people were in on. Jimmy Butler is having quietly an MVP quality season. He's obviously not the same level as the top three candidates, which are going to be Jokic, Embiid, and Giannis. Um, but Jimmy Butler has an 8.6 box plus minus historically that will win you MVPs. But also just like it gets you in the MVP conversation usually, right? He's got actually a better box plus minus than Giannis this season. So for me, I just kind of wish that like Jimmy Butler like shows up in the playoffs and kicks ass, and everyone's like, "Oh yeah, Jimmy Butler's great." I'm like, Jimmy Butler isn't just this dude that shows up in the playoffs. He shows up in the regular season and is an absolute animal. I think the thing he suffers from is, and I've said this before, is like he's not a super high volume scorer. He's not a super high volume assist guy, but he's a very good scorer. He gets a ton of free throws. He's a very good free throw shooter. He's a good playmaker. And the thing I think that's most underrated about him is he's got an 8.3 turnover percentage, right? Like he is one of the lowest turnover players in the league for a guy with a 27.1 assist percentage and a 25.7 usage. The number of turnovers he has is so fucking low that like people don't look at that stat as like, oh, he's like this low in turnovers. That's great. But for a high usage player, he never turns the ball over. And then when it comes to defense, I mean, we're talking about to me, he's like one of the best two-way wings. He's better in my opinion right now than Kawhi Leonard, and he's had a better season than Kawhi. I just wish we would give Jimmy Butler his flowers in the regular season when he's kicking ass instead of waiting for him to be like, all right, it's take over. I'm going to take an incredible number of shots, 37 points, save my team's season performance. Like he's great. He's MVP. He should be in the MVP discussion. He's been better than Jason Tatum. I love you, Jimmy Butler. You're my man. I don't drink Michelob Ultra because I'm not a nerd, but everything else. And then the hair, the trolling with the dreadlocks. Like that was an MVP decision to make with the
Yeah.
dreadlocks. I mean, it's just Jimmy Butler, Jimmy Buckets, MVP candidate, and the Chicago Bulls could have had you for some, but they just said no.